The mess hall buzzed with the midday chaos unique to a Marine Corps base. Trays clattered against tables, the hiss of coffee machines mingled with laughter, and the rhythmic hum of voices layered with the occasional shout from a drill instructor passing through. Sunlight spilled through the tall windows, catching the dust in the air and illuminating the orderly chaos of uniforms and boots. Every Marine seemed in their own world, caught between fatigue, hunger, and camaraderie. Amid it all, a young woman with a calm, almost unreadable expression moved gracefully between tables, her tray held steadily in her hands. She was not particularly tall, and her frame might have seemed fragile to someone who judged by appearances alone. Yet there was an unmistakable aura of presence about her, a quiet confidence, eyes sharp and calculating, muscles coiled in restrained energy. Most of the Marines scarcely noticed her, assuming her quietness meant she was just another recruit. That assumption shattered in an instant. A burly Marine, broad-shouldered and brimming with overconfidence, spotted her from across the hall. He smirked, muttering under his breath as he walked toward her, eyes scanning the tray she carried with what he perceived as a small, vulnerable bounty. Without warning, he shoved her with the side of his hand, making her tray tilt dangerously. Coffee sloshed, silverware rattled, and a slice of bread slipped toward the floor. "Watch where you're going, witch," he sneered, a cruel grin spreading across his face. "Mess hall isn't for ghosts like you." The words hit with the weight of provocation, but her face remained impassive. For a heartbeat, she simply looked at him, her eyes calm, yet cold, calculating. The hall seemed to pause around them. Conversations faded into muffled background noise, all attention subtly gravitated toward the tension building between the two. "Drop dead witch," she muttered under her breath, almost inaudible to anyone else. And then the moment exploded. Before he could react further, her movements were fluid, precise, almost invisible. She pivoted, using his forward momentum to off-balance him, twisting his arm and sending him sprawling to the floor with a grunt. Every motion was controlled, disciplined, deadly without a hint of unnecessary force. The surrounding Marines froze, a mixture of shock and awe crossing their faces. Some whispered, others stared openly, trying to process what they had just witnessed. The aggressor scrambled to his feet, cheeks flushed with humiliation and anger. He opened his mouth, perhaps to retort or reassert dominance, but she had already collected her tray, moving past him as though nothing had happened. Her stride was steady, deliberate, the calmness in her expression an enigma. "Who the hell was that?" one young Marine muttered to a friend nearby, voice tinged with disbelief. Others nodded, glancing at her with a mixture of curiosity and fear. Rumors would begin to swirl here, fueled by whispers and conjecture. Nobody could explain how a seemingly ordinary recruit could dominate a seasoned Marine without so much as a bruise. Even the commanding officers passing through took note, their eyes narrowing thoughtfully. There was something different about her, something almost imperceptible yet undeniably potent. The way she carried herself, the silent confidence, the lightning-fast reaction, it all pointed to someone trained far beyond the level of a standard recruit. The bully Marine lingered for a moment, glaring after her retreating figure, jaw tight, fists clenched. Pride stung, humiliation burned, and the questions in his mind festered into a silent promise. He would not let this go. Meanwhile, she reached the far end of the hall, balancing her tray with ease, a faint smirk playing on her lips. She knew exactly what she had done. Not to hurt, but to establish control, to set the tone, underestimate her at your peril. As she disappeared from sight, whispers continued, bouncing from table to table. "She's not just a recruit," one muttered. Another voice added, "Have you seen her eyes? Like she's always 10 steps ahead." Unbeknownst to everyone present, that simple mess hall encounter had revealed only a fraction of her capabilities. She had walked among ordinary Marines and left an impression that would ripple through the ranks for days. And while the base had returned to its usual routine moments later, the story of the witch had only just begun. The mess hall incident quickly became the talk of the base. By evening, the clatter of trays and chatter in the chow lines had been replaced by hushed whispers and sideways glances. Marines gathered in small clusters, their conversations punctuated by the occasional nervous laugh or incredulous shake of the head. "Did you see what she did to him?" one young corporal whispered. "He's lucky she didn't." Another voice stopped abruptly, swallowed by uncertainty. Everyone knew something extraordinary had just happened, but nobody could put a finger on what it meant. She moved through the ranks with the same calm precision as before, collecting her gear, wiping down her tray, and observing quietly. To the untrained eye, she looked like any other Marine, uniform pressed, boots polished, demeanor professional, but the small details betrayed her. Her eyes constantly scanned the room, noting angles, body positions, and potential threats. Fingers tapped lightly against the tray's edge, as if testing her reflexes. Muscles were tense under the seemingly relaxed posture, ready to spring at a moment's notice. Even the Marine who had shoved her earlier fumed quietly in the corner, nursing bruised pride more than actual pain. He had spent his career believing in brute force, in intimidation, in dominance through sheer size and aggression. This girl had shattered every assumption. The humiliation burned deep, and he vowed silently that he would find a way to regain control, to challenge her again. His anger simmered like a low fire, waiting for the spark that would reignite the confrontation. Meanwhile, others could not stop speculating. Rumors swirled through the barracks. She was ex-special forces, some whispered. Others claimed she was part of an experimental program. Nobody knew for sure. Some even joked nervously about her being untouchable, a ghost trained in ways no ordinary recruit could understand. Yet every speculation seemed insufficient. None of the stories fully captured the eerie calm with which she moved, or the lethal efficiency she had displayed without breaking a sweat. At the far edge of the base, a shadowy figure watched from behind a line of stacked crates near the perimeter fence. Their binoculars tracked her movements with clinical precision, fingers tapping lightly on the frame as if taking notes. Every gesture, every glance, every small motion was being logged and assessed. Unlike the ordinary Marines, this observer knew that what they were watching was far more than a simple brawl. She wasn't just quick. She was trained to anticipate, neutralize, and control. And she was hiding it well. Inside the barracks, the young woman reflected briefly on the incident. Her mind ran through the sequence of events, calculating and analyzing even the smallest details. She allowed herself a faint, almost imperceptible smile. The incident had achieved exactly what she wanted, a subtle demonstration of her capabilities without exposing the full extent of her skills. Her cover as an ordinary Marine remained intact, but the baseline of respect or fear had shifted quietly but irrevocably. She had spent years in a classified Navy SEAL program, trained in survival, intelligence gathering, and combat far beyond the scope of regular military training. Every skill, every movement, every controlled reaction was ingrained through discipline and repetition. But now she had a mission that required her to blend in, to move through the base unnoticed, and to maintain the illusion of ordinariness. The balance between concealment and dominance was delicate but necessary. By nightfall, the barracks had quieted, yet the story of the witch was far from over. Marines whispered in dark corners, rehashing every moment of the mess hall incident. Questions lingered. Who was she? Where did she come from? And most importantly, what was she capable of? The answers were hidden, locked behind her controlled exterior and years of secret training. And somewhere beyond the perimeter, the observer made a note. She was a Marine in appearance, a weapon in reality. The base had yet to realize the storm that walked among them. The night air outside the barracks was thick with humidity, carrying the faint scent of diesel and wet grass from the nearby training grounds. Inside, she sat alone on the edge of her bunk, tray of untouched food pushed aside. Her posture was relaxed, but every muscle remained subtly engaged, ready to spring into action. She exhaled slowly, letting the quiet of the room wash over her, but her mind was anything but calm. Memories of a life long buried crept into her thoughts. Years ago, she had been part of a classified Navy SEAL program, one so secretive that few outside the highest echelons of military intelligence even knew it existed. Recruits were subjected to grueling physical trials, mental conditioning, and covert operations that would break the ordinary soldier. Sleep was a luxury, hesitation a weakness, failure a death sentence, figuratively at first, then almost literally as missions grew more dangerous. Her body had been sculpted into a weapon, her mind, a finely tuned instrument of calculation and anticipation. Her instructors had demanded perfection, often punishing mistakes with relentless drills or high-pressure simulations designed to push recruits past the limits of fear and pain. She had learned to read a room, to anticipate movement, to act before a threat fully materialized. Every reflex, every subtle motion had been honed until it was second nature. At times, she had thought she would lose herself in the program, become nothing but a tool for combat and stealth. Yet somehow she had endured and thrived. But now here she was, embedded in a Marine base, pretending to be ordinary. The past she carried could not be revealed, not to officers, not to recruits, not even to those she had fought alongside in minor drills. Her mission required subtlety, the ability to operate in plain sight unnoticed while maintaining the deadly skills that could turn the tide in a crisis. Every interaction, every movement, was calculated to reveal just enough capability to command respect, without drawing attention to the lethal expertise lurking beneath. She thought briefly of the Marine she had disarmed in the mess hall. His arrogance had been so predictable, so easily manipulated. Years of training had taught her to read aggression like a map, to exploit overconfidence without giving herself away. Yet even as she replayed the encounter, there was no satisfaction in humiliation alone. Her goals were higher: information, preparation, and the quiet establishment of authority without revealing the full extent of her arsenal. Sometimes, in the solitude of the night, she allowed herself to remember the missions she had undertaken in secrecy: remote insertions, high-risk reconnaissance, hostage extractions in hostile territory. The adrenaline, the fear, the precision, all had been burned into her memory. And yet she had emerged unscathed, not through luck, but through preparation, discipline, and the ability to remain calm under chaos. That calmness now disguised itself as quiet competence among the Marines, giving her the perfect cover. Still, the duality of her existence weighed on her. She could not allow herself to become complacent, nor could she reveal too much. One slip could compromise not only her cover, but the classified missions she had yet to complete. She was caught between two worlds: the ordinary, regulated life of a Marine base and the deadly, clandestine reality of a Navy SEAL operative trained for war. Balancing both required constant vigilance, and every glance, every decision was a test of control. Outside, the base hummed with ordinary life. Footsteps echoed in the corridors, distant laughter floated from the mess hall, and the occasional bark of a drill sergeant punctuated the night. Inside her room, she lay back, eyes scanning the ceiling, replaying every detail of the day. Every interaction, every glance from a fellow Marine, every subtle gesture could be a threat or an opportunity. She had survived worse than this, endured far more perilous situations, yet the challenge of blending in without losing herself was its own kind of trial. She rose quietly, stretching her limbs, aware that tomorrow would bring new tests. The Marine she had subdued would undoubtedly continue his petty attempts at dominance, and unknown threats might already be watching. Her past was a shield, her training a sword, but here she had to wield them in silence. And so the witch prepared herself, once again ready to navigate a world that could never truly understand the storm she carried within. The morning sun streamed through the base's obstacle course, casting long shadows across the muddy ground. Sweat and dust clung to every Marine as they maneuvered through tires, ropes, and walls, each step a test of endurance. Among them, she moved deliberately, fluidly, her motions precise, each landing soft yet controlled. Nothing in her demeanor suggested extraordinary skill until it revealed itself. The same Marine from the mess hall had chosen today as the stage for his petty revenge. He circled her like a predator, smirking, throwing taunts that were both calculated and cruel. "Hey, witch, try not to break a nail on the walls," he called, laughter dripping with arrogance. Around them, others glanced over, some snickering, others uneasy. Even the drill instructors noticed the tension. She ignored the provocation, maintaining a slow, steady rhythm. Her eyes, however, tracked his every movement, noting weaknesses in posture, imbalance in stride, and subtle habits that betrayed his overconfidence. Years of SEAL training had taught her to read body language like a map, an instinctive skill honed in high-risk missions where even a microsecond of misjudgment could mean death. The Marine lunged at her mid-course, attempting a shove as she scaled the wall. It was clumsy, predictable, a reflection of arrogance rather than strategy. She sidestepped effortlessly, redirecting his momentum into the soft mud below. He fell with a grunt, sputtering indignantly, and she didn't flinch. Fellow Marines gasped at the subtle efficiency of her movement. "Not bad for a witch," he sneered, wiping mud from his uniform. Her lips quirked slightly, a faint acknowledgement. She knew the game had only begun. The mess hall incident had taught her one thing: confrontation was inevitable, but timing was everything. She would let him push, let him reveal his weaknesses, all while maintaining the illusion of control without fully exposing her lethal skills. Patience was power, restraint a weapon. As the training continued, whispers grew among nearby recruits. "Have you noticed how she moves?" one asked another, voice low. "She's different." Another shook his head. "It's almost like she's expecting everything before it happens." Rumors began to form, subtle and uneasy, but still contained. Nobody yet knew her true background, yet instinct recognized a predator cloaked in civilian form. Later in the gym, the aggressor tried another provocation, this time on the sparring mats. He attempted to corner her, feigning strikes and pressing her into a defensive position. She parried with minimal effort, every motion economical yet precise. Around her, Marines watched in awe, some whispering that she moved like she had fought in far more dangerous arenas than a base gym. And in truth, she had. She had faced missions where failure meant death, where split-second decisions saved lives or ended them. Despite the mounting tension, she offered nothing unnecessary, no overreaction, no anger, no overt display of power. Only subtle cues, a shift of weight, a controlled redirection, an almost imperceptible feint. Every interaction was a lesson in discipline, every counter a demonstration that force alone would never succeed against her. By late afternoon, the aggressor Marine's frustration had peaked. His attempts to provoke her had failed repeatedly. The other Marines began to sense the unspoken hierarchy emerging. She was untouchable, even without drawing a weapon. Every movement radiated calm authority, every glance conveyed a warning. And yet the quiet observer beyond the perimeter watched closely. From the shadows, a figure recorded every motion, every technique, noting both her skill and restraint. What the other Marines saw as a remarkable recruit, the observer knew to be an operative hiding in plain sight, a weapon disguised as a soldier. As she left the course, sweat glistening on her brow, she glanced over her shoulder. The Marine who sought to challenge her lingered, fists clenching, pride shattered, plans for retaliation already forming in his mind. She didn't need to look back. She knew the confrontation would return. In the meantime, she had sent a message without a word: underestimate her and you will fail. The sun dipped low, shadows lengthening across the base. Tomorrow would bring new provocations, new tests, but she was ready. Calm, precise, and deadly, she walked back toward the barracks, a predator disguised among ordinary soldiers, her secret life tucked beneath a veneer of Marine discipline. And the storm she carried inside remained unseen, waiting for the moment it would strike. Night had settled over the base, a heavy silence broken only by distant hums of generators and the occasional bark of a drill sergeant making his rounds. Most Marines had retreated to the barracks or the quiet of their bunks, unaware that danger lurked closer than they imagined. Somewhere beyond the perimeter fence, shadows shifted, coordinated, silent, and deadly. Someone or something had been watching her since the mess hall incident, and now the observers had moved. She sensed it first in the subtle signs that seasoned operatives learned to read. A faint disturbance in the night air, the soft crunch of footsteps out of sync with the base's routine, a whisper of metal against concrete. Her heart rate remained steady, mind alert but calm. Years of classified Navy SEAL training had taught her to detect threats before they became obvious, to anticipate movements and patterns, and to act with precision when necessary. She moved silently toward the supply yard, following instincts that had kept her alive in hostile territory on multiple classified missions. Crates and containers loomed in the darkness, perfect for concealment and observation. Shadows stretched unnaturally, revealing the subtle presence of intruders. 3 men, armed and coordinated, were attempting to bypass the perimeter quietly, likely unaware of how close they were to disaster. Her body tensed, muscles coiled like springs. She didn't hesitate. Within seconds, she had closed the distance, using the cover of darkness to her advantage. Every movement was deliberate, silent, precise, lethal without being overt. One attacker turned to check a corner, only to be tripped by a barely perceptible foot sweep. Another reached for a weapon, but she redirected his wrist, forcing him to drop it with a controlled twist. The third moved forward aggressively, and she sidestepped, using his momentum to send him sprawling into a stack of crates. The entire encounter lasted mere moments, yet the impact was profound. The attackers lay incapacitated but alive, enough to send a message, not enough to compromise her ethics or mission. She scanned the area quickly, confirming that no alarms had been triggered. Her movements were precise, almost ghost-like, leaving no trace except the unconscious intruders. Nearby, the perimeter cameras had recorded nothing unusual. Any casual observer would have assumed the yard was empty. Yet in the shadows, someone beyond the fence took careful notes, studying her actions, impressed by her efficiency and subtle restraint. To ordinary Marines, this woman had seemed merely capable. To the trained eye, she was an operative operating at the apex of skill and strategy. A short encrypted message arrived on a device hidden beneath her sleeve. "They know. Move now." Her jaw tightened, eyes narrowing as she processed the words. It was confirmation. The base had been compromised. What she had sensed instinctively was no longer hypothetical. She was now part of an active threat scenario. She had to act quickly, maintain her cover, and ensure the safety of the base without revealing the full extent of her capabilities. Moving like a shadow, she secured the perimeter silently, repositioning patrols she could subtly influence. adjusting lighting and patrol routes without anyone noticing. Every step was deliberate, designed to create the illusion of normalcy while preparing for the potential escalation. Even the aggressor Marine, still simmering with anger and humiliation from the obstacle course, was oblivious to the danger just beyond the perimeter. If he had any idea what was happening, his reaction would have been panic. Instead, he carried on, unaware of the storm silently neutralizing threats around him. By the time she returned to the barracks, the intruders were safely restrained, the base secure, and no one had any idea of the life-or-death scenario that had just unfolded. She cleaned herself, eating quietly as if the night had been ordinary. Yet she knew that this was only the beginning. External threats were now actively seeking her, and the base, while her secret skills remained hidden, ready to be unleashed only when necessary. In the quiet darkness, she allowed herself a small, fleeting thought. The game had changed. The witch was no longer just a mysterious recruit. She was a protector, a weapon, and a force that few would ever understand. And she was far from done. The next morning dawned over the base, the sun climbing slowly over the training grounds, casting long, sharp shadows across the sand and mud of the obstacle course. The air was thick with the smell of sweat, fuel, and disciplined activity. Most Marines were already in formation, performing drills, their faces etched with routine focus. Yet one Marine lingered near the edges, his eyes tracking her with a mixture of resentment and fascination. The aggressor Marine had not forgotten. Humiliation from previous encounters burned deep, and he had spent the night replaying every detail in his mind, plotting his retaliation. He had convinced himself that today he would finally assert dominance, break the barrier she had so effortlessly erected. Pride demanded it, ego required it, and the quiet whisper of fear he refused to acknowledge spurred him forward. She noticed him immediately, the tense way he carried himself, the almost imperceptible twitch in his jaw, the way his eyes flicked toward her as if measuring the distance between them. She didn't flinch. Instead, she walked with calm precision, every movement controlled, every step deliberate. This confrontation had been inevitable, and she was prepared. The Marine stepped forward, blocking her path on the course. "So, witch," he sneered, "we're face to face again. Think you can keep embarrassing me?" His tone was equal parts mockery and challenge. Around them, a few Marines paused, sensing the tension, some curious, others wary. Even the instructors cast glances in their direction, intrigued by the silent battle of wills unfolding before them. She regarded him quietly, her expression unreadable, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of the storm beneath. Years of SEAL training had taught her that intimidation worked only if met with hesitation. Hesitation could kill. She allowed a small, controlled demonstration, a subtle shift of stance, a slight tightening of the fists, a pivot of the hips that suggested power restrained. It was enough. The Marine froze, a brief hesitation betraying the recognition that she was no ordinary opponent. "You should know your limits," she said, voice calm, almost soft. "Brute force alone won't win against someone who's trained to anticipate everything." Her words carried weight because every motion reinforced them. She didn't strike. She didn't need to. Her posture, precision, and quiet authority were sufficient to establish dominance. The Marine laughed nervously, trying to mask the sudden uncertainty creeping in. "Trained, huh? Trained in what?" he demanded, though his voice wavered. She didn't answer directly. Instead, she moved closer, circling him like a predator, subtle movements demonstrating control without aggression. A twist of the wrist here, a step to his blind spot there. She showcased the kind of efficiency that could have ended the encounter in seconds if she wished. Other Marines began to whisper, realizing for the first time that she might be more than rumor suggested. Every micro-motion spoke of skill, experience, and lethal competence. And though she remained calm, the aura of command radiated power. He began to step back, pride colliding with instinct, understanding slowly but too late that he had underestimated her entirely. Finally, she allowed herself to speak again, a faint edge of warning in her tone. "Learn from this. Underestimating me could be dangerous." The message was clear. Respect was earned, caution mandatory. The Marine nodded reluctantly, pride battered, ego bruised, but fear of the unknown beginning to root itself in his mind. Across the training grounds, shadows shifted beyond the perimeter. Unknown observers recorded every movement, their eyes nodding her efficiency, restraint, and quiet lethal capacity. To ordinary Marines, she had simply won a personal battle. To trained operatives watching from afar, she was unmistakably elite, an operative hiding in plain sight. The encounter ended without a fight, yet the impact was seismic. Whispers rippled through the ranks. She was no ordinary recruit, no ordinary Marine. The aggressor Marine walked away with a humbling realization, and those who watched understood that the witch commanded power quietly, invisibly, and lethally. As she resumed her path across the training ground, calm and measured, her mind already analyzed contingencies. Threats both internal and external were brewing. She was prepared. Her secret skills were no longer just a defense, they were a statement. The storm was coming, and she was ready to meet it head-on. Night fell over the base like a heavy blanket, swallowing the quiet hum of generators and the distant cries of night watch. For most Marines, the evening was ordinary, lights dimmed, footsteps echoing softly along the barracks. But she sensed it immediately. Subtle movements beyond the perimeter, too synchronized to be random, too deliberate to be anything but a coordinated assault. Her pulse remained steady. Years in the classified Navy SEAL program had conditioned her to recognize danger long before it arrived. Every sound, every shadow, every faint shift in the wind carried meaning. She moved silently, slipping between patrols, scanning with heightened awareness. The attackers were skilled. They had observed, learned, and calculated their approach. But she had trained to anticipate threats in far more hostile environments, where a single misstep could cost lives. The first breach occurred near the supply yard, where intruders attempted to scale the fences under the cover of darkness. She intercepted them without a sound, neutralizing each one with controlled precision. Twists, holds, and subtle redirections left them incapacitated but alive, evidence that her goal was mission success, not unnecessary brutality. In the shadows, the perimeter cameras remained oblivious. The base's defenders had no idea a life-or-death scenario was unfolding right under their noses. Simultaneously, she coordinated her team with quiet, authoritative signals. A tilt of the head, a shift of weight, a barely perceptible hand gesture, small cues that organized small units, creating a defensive web that anticipated every possible threat vector. Marines who had once doubted her capability now followed instinctively, drawn into her calm efficiency. The aggressor Marine from the mess hall, now wide-eyed and breathless, struggled to keep pace. His earlier arrogance had vanished, replaced with awe and fear. He followed her silently, learning that brute force alone could never match her combination of strategic thinking, speed, and discipline. For the first time, he witnessed the full scope of her power, not just physical skill, but tactical mastery and leadership under fire. Explosions and gunfire punctuated the night, sending sparks across the training grounds. She moved among the chaos like a ghost, never wasting energy, never panicking. Every shot fired, every obstacle navigated, every Marine positioned was part of a larger strategy, orchestrated flawlessly under extreme pressure. By the time the attackers realized the full depth of resistance, it was too late. Her eyes scanned the perimeter continuously. Shadowy figures attempted to flank the base, but she anticipated their movements, guiding reinforcements silently, creating crossfire zones without anyone realizing the danger had been mitigated before it escalated. A pair of intruders tried to sneak toward the barracks. With a subtle shift and silent leap, she incapacitated them before they even reached the doorway. By the time the first rays of dawn crept over the horizon, the assault had been contained. Casualties were minimal, and the attackers had been neutralized or captured. The base, once vulnerable, now stood secure, its defenders unaware of how close disaster had come or of the operative who had ensured their survival. Around her, Marines began to whisper. The same recruits who had watched her calmly sidestep provocations and handle the aggressor Marine were now in awe. "She's not just a Marine," one murmured. "She's something else." The legend of the witch had solidified in a single night, built not on rumor, but on undeniable action. She surveyed the scene, eyes sharp despite exhaustion. The base had been attacked, the threats neutralized, and her secret remained intact. Yet in the quiet aftermath, she understood one thing clearly: this was only the beginning. The storm was far from over, and new dangers would come. She had to remain vigilant, calm, and ready. As dawn painted the sky in orange and gold, she walked back toward the barracks, her figure calm and deliberate. Around her, the base returned to routine, unaware that a single woman had turned the tide of a potentially catastrophic attack. The witch moved silently, unstoppable, her presence now forever etched into the memory of every Marine who had witnessed her lethal grace. The first light of dawn crept across the base, brushing the mess hall and barracks in muted gold. The night's chaos had subsided, leaving a haunting calm in its wake. Marines moved about, checking equipment, exchanging tired nods, still unaware of how narrowly disaster had been avoided. Casualties were minimal. The attackers had been neutralized with precision that would go unnoticed by most. But in the aftermath, whispers of her actions already circulated, spreading silently like wildfire. She entered the mess hall, her uniform still streaked with dust and sweat, hair slightly disheveled from the night's operations. Her steps were deliberate, each movement calm and composed. Around her, Marines looked up, eyes widening as fragments of last night's events returned to their minds. The aggressor Marine from the previous confrontations approached her cautiously, face pale, ego battered, yet humbled. For once, his arrogance had no foothold. He stopped a few paces away, voice barely above a whisper. I guess I underestimated you, he admitted, swallowing hard. Pride and humiliation collided on his face, leaving only grudging respect. She nodded subtly, no words needed to assert her dominance. The message had been delivered. Underestimating her was a mistake that could have cost lives, and brute strength alone could never match her skill, patience, and precision. Other Marines lingered nearby, whispering quietly among themselves. Rumors that had started in the mess hall weeks ago now took root in reality. "She's not just a Marine, she's a weapon," one muttered. Another added, "I've never seen anyone move like that. She's like a ghost." Few realized how close the base had come to catastrophe, or that the storm they had narrowly survived had been quelled by a single operative hiding in plain sight. She ate her breakfast quietly, methodical, as though the night's events were nothing more than routine. But inside, her mind was already processing contingencies, reviewing every move, every detail, ensuring nothing had been overlooked. Threats had come and been neutralized, but she knew the world beyond the base would not wait. There were always more missions, more dangers, more shadows watching. The calm was temporary, vigilance was eternal. Her thoughts briefly returned to the shadowy observer she had sensed beyond the perimeter, the figure recording her every movement. The message from last night, "They know, move now," still echoed in her mind. It had been a warning, a signal that the enemies she thought were distant had drawn closer. The world she had trained to navigate, full of covert operations, danger, and secrets, was always one step ahead of those who lived in ordinary comfort. She thrived in it. She was ready for it. The mess hall emptied gradually, leaving her alone for a moment. She cleaned her tray with practiced efficiency, pausing to glance at the empty doorway. A faint smile crossed her lips, not of arrogance but of understanding. Her mission here was far from over, but she had proven, both to herself and to those who doubted her, that she was capable of handling anything. The aggressor Marine had learned his lesson. The base had been defended. Yet her secret remained, carefully concealed beneath the veneer of an ordinary recruit. A faint vibration alerted her to a new message on her encrypted device. She picked it up, reading only a single line. "Prepare, next assignment is imminent." She tucked the device away, her mind already shifting to strategy, contingency planning, and the challenges ahead. Calm on the surface, storm within, she had lived her life in this balance for years, and she would continue to do so. Rising from the table, she walked out into the early morning light. Marines moved past her, some glancing with curiosity, others still whispering her name in awe. None fully understood what she was or what she was capable of. She walked silently, her presence commanding without effort, the legend of the witch growing quietly with every step. The base was safe for now, but the world beyond the fences would test her again. And when it did, she would be ready. Calm, deadly, and unstoppable, the witch had proven that a single operative could change the outcome of an entire night, and perhaps an entire war. She disappeared into the dawn, leaving a trail of whispers, awe, and fear, forever a shadow in plain sight, always prepared for the battles yet to come.